Welcome everyone. My name is Richard Taylor with Ideate Software. I want to thank Microsol Resources for hosting this particular webinar about automating document issue and revision records with Ideate BIMLink and Ideate Sticky. So just real briefly about Ideate Software. We are a premier Autodesk authorized developer actually since 2008, so it's been over 10 years. It's funny that Dan just mentioned that 2020 was released officially yesterday. I had to change this slide so that we're supporting and updating on the last 4 releases of Revit. So right now 2017, 18, 19, and 20. So what that means is not only do we update, our software solutions for Revit 2020, but we also release and update the same feature set for the last 4 releases, again, where it's applicable. For instance, our Ideate Explorer release will have the new path of travel that's available in Revit 2020, meaning that's a new element type that you can review. Now, that element type won't be available in 19, 18, and 17, but the feature set, again, is pretty similar. What we try to do is where it's applicable for the Revit version, we make those features available. And we're really known for our outstanding interface, our extensive online help. We have a lot of training videos and help topics and some information that I'll kind of touch upon today in today's webinar as well. And we have clients all over the world. Our partner, we have several partners in North America. Our partner in the Northeast, as you know, is Microsol Resources. But again, we have customers all over the world, and we focus only on Revit solutions. So our team is really laser focused on Revit. And so Ideate Software creates 4 add-on solutions to Revit. And you see there on the screen, Ideate BIMLink, Ideate Sticky, Ideate Explorer, and Ideate Apps. And today we're going to be talking about a sort of a specific workflow. So instead of talking about sort of all the features and functionality, we're going to be just talking about these 2 applications, Ideate BIMLink and Ideate Sticky, but how they relate to the whole revision process within Revit and how you can use that to streamline the revision process and make it a lot easier for you. So with that, let's talk about some Revit revision basics. So just revisions within Revit themselves. So revisions in Revit, it's the process of recording changes to a document set that's after they've been issued, or you've done the construction, maybe the construction documentation, or you're doing an addendum or request for information. And so you're basically, Revit allows you to have this revisions and revision sequences. And Revit allows 2 basically options for the revision sequence. So that you see there on the screen, 1 through 6, we have per project and per sheet. So it depends on, like if it's per project, it would mean you'd have, if you had 300 revisions across a number of sheets, you'd have 1 through 300. If it's per sheet, you would have the revisions like on this sheet 1 through 3, and then the next sheet would also have a 1 through 3 or 1 through 4, whatever the number was. So, but it would repeat basically based on the sheet. So there's a little different there. So it's important to kind of understand, what revision sequence you are using. And then it allows you, Revit allows you the ability to customize, so you can have numeric sequencing, or you can have alphanumeric, or you can actually have none. So that's another thing to be cognizant of within this particular dialog. Okay, and so revision clouds are annotative elements that can be placed directly in the view or on a sheet. You can't place them on schedules though, unfortunately. And so when you place the annotation, that revision information will be available in the title block if the title block has been set up to show revisions. And I'm going to show that in a second here. And so what's the some of the issues or problems is that you'll see, and I'm going to demonstrate that when there are multiple revisions on a sheet or multiple revisions within a project, you can only show in Revit in a schedule the last or the current revision. So let's say that on a sheet you had 5 revision sequences. the Revit only allows you to show the fifth one, which is the last one, the current one, but that's not, it doesn't work for everyone. In many cases, you have to show the list of all of the revisions on the sheet. And so that's what we're going to set up here for we have an Excel file that's going to help you with that. But before we do that, all right, I want to talk just a little bit about sort of the process of revisions. So what I just went over there, let's go switch over here. So today I'm using Revit 2019. I wasn't bold enough to download 2020 just yesterday and go through the presentation, but I'm sure I'll be doing that soon. So here we have a Revit sheet. I've already placed one addendum, right? And if I zoom up on the sheet, you'll actually notice that there is a RFI, request for information, number 4 here. This was revisions number 1 on this sheet. So the way that you access the revisions in Revit, you go over here to the view and you'll go to revisions. And so now this dialog is talking about, again, what I mentioned is, in this case, I've set this up per sheet. So there's going to be a 1 through 5 on one sheet. The next sheet it'll start over with 1 through 5, or whatever my sequence is. And then so I'm doing that per sheet as opposed to per project. So the way that I wanted to add, like let's say in this case I've got 4 sequences. 2 of them have been issued, as you see here. They've got the tick mark for issued. So I'm going to just come to the bottom here and I'm just going to say add. It adds a new sequence, and then I can come over here to the dialog box and I can say, well, you know what, it's 04, it's 1119. Let's make sure I do that dash there. And we're going to say this is RFI and number 5, right? So all I did there was basically add a new sequence showing today's date, and then I'm going to be showing the cloud and the tag. And I don't have any information here of who it was issued to or issued by yet. So I'm just going to say OK. Then the second step of this process is to go over here to annotate, and you're going to select a revision cloud. When you select a revision cloud, you're drawing. It's like drawing a floor slab or a ceiling, where you've got this the draw dialog here, and then over in the properties palette you have, well, what revision are you using? And by default it's the last one, which in this case are the last one I used. Now I want to make sure that it's highlighting sequence 5. That's the one I just created, right? So there's sequence 5, which is the request for information number 5, right? And so then I would just come over here, I'd draw my little cloud, and I'd hit the check mark to say I'm finished in the draw mode. And a couple things happened is, when I click on the cloud, you'll notice that it actually over here in the properties palette, it is sequence 5. And in the title block, it is now on this sheet, it is sequence number 2, and it's RFI 5, and it has the date 04/11/19. So again, that's the way this works. Now, as I said, we've got 2 revisions on this sheet, right? And what if I wanted to show both of those? Well, if I come over here to my schedules, right, I've got a schedule for sheets, and there's not a revision schedule within Revit. What you have to do is add that information like onto a sheet or add it onto other entities. In this case, since we're doing it per sheet, it makes sense to do it by the sheet. So I've got a sheet list here, and you'll notice that I've got the sheet number and the sheet name, right? And so I'm going to go over to the available fields within the schedule, and you can come down here and you can see that I actually have the revision, but notice it says current revision. So I can do the current revision, double click, and the description. So what that shows me is that, okay, well, if we come down here to my A11, which is what I'm showing, the furniture plan, I have, this is sequence number 2, RFI 5. That's the latest or the last in the sequence. So I can only show the last revision. And like I said, sometimes you want to be able to show all of the revisions on the sheet. So we're going to give you a process to be able to do that. But I just wanted to show you a little bit about how this is just basic Revit, right? I haven't showed any of the Ideate software tools yet, just how the revisions work. All right, let's switch back over here. So what is Ideate BIMLink? Ideate BIMLink allows you to take almost any information from the Revit model and be able to send it to Excel for updating, manipulation, review, and adding of elements, and then importing that data back into the Revit model. And so what Ideate BIMLink does is it gives you a lot of control over things that just aren't possible in the Revit schedules. So we really give you access to all of the parameter information. In fact, just to give you some example, there are things like offset elevations. There are things like, is it an in-place family? Is the status, is it a pinned element? Is it not? Those are things that Revit knows about, but you can't access them within the Revit user interface or the Revit schedules. So we're kind of peeling off the saran wrap, if you will, and being able to access a lot of that information that you have available, but you just don't have a way to sort of easily manipulate it. So again, this is just kind of the reiterating the point of what Ideate BIMLink is all about. Accessing large amounts of your Revit data, editing parameters, renaming elements, managing, and this is what I was talking about, really non-schedule data, things that just aren't available, within the schedule. Perfect example is the revisions. Like I said, we're giving you access to all of the revisions on a sheet or project, not just the current one. And then you're going to see that I can actually create new elements using Ideate BIMLink too. Create new schedule keys, masses, models. The one, of course, I'm going to use for this particular instance is revisions, right? Okay, so let's switch back over here to Revit, and let's go to my Ideate software tab. If you've installed any of the Ideate software solutions, you will have an Ideate software ribbon tab. When I select on the ribbon tab, you'll see that I have all of my Ideate software solutions. And of course, I've installed them all. So you'll see BIMLink, Explorer, Sticky, and our collection of productivity tools is called Ideate Apps. But I'm going to start with Ideate BIMLink here and open that up. And purposely, I cleared out any link definition. So this is like when you're first starting, you've got this. It's basically saying, I don't have any links defined in this project. And so you may say, well, what is a link? A link is a definition of information you'd like to review. Very similar to a schedule, but it's a lot more powerful. So instead of just starting, I can go over here and say new, and I can pick the category that I want. There's all these categories. But an easier way is we've actually supplied about 300 sample link definitions. So when you come over here to load sample, I always tell people that's the first thing you should really look at, is look at all the samples that we have, and we've classified them into a series or organization of, architectural information, COBie links, COBie information for the construction, MEP, project standards, quality control. But we've also implemented something. If you just select on the top level samples, you can just type in what you're looking for. So for instance, if I did want to say, I'll just show you rename. These are things that I can rename: duct systems, piping, project standards, QC, space naming. But if I wanted to say, oh, revisions, let's type that in. So here's all the things that are, revision clouds that have been unused, revision clouds to move them, unissued. But the couple of them we're going to do is, I'm going to do this first one, revisions create new. So maybe I want to create before I export this, or to show you the kind of template here, I want to make sure that all of my revision sequences are what I want in the project, right? So I'm going to select that one. And basically it builds the properties. You'll see that here we have, if I open this up a little bit, we have over here to the left available properties like a schedule. And then the linked properties are what I'm prepared to send out to Excel. So the revision date, the description, the issued by, issued to, right? And so if I wanted to actually do, like, say, the revision sequence, I could add that. I could move it up in my list. If I wanted to add, for instance, the work set, I could add that as well and maybe move that one down, right? So now I have, basically the work set for revision settings, the numbering, these are the two in gray, they have already been issued. So the idea here is that you're not able to modify the date or the sequence because they've already been issued. So what I can do here is say, you know what, I'm going to go to my filter, and I'm going to go and say, you know what, I would like to look at the issued, and I want to say where it's equal to. And notice that we have quite a few conditions, you know, whether it's equal to, not equal to, editable, not editable, applicable. And I'm going to say false. If I've spelled that right. So what that means is if it's already been issued, right, which would be like issued is equal to true, then that would be filtering out all the ones that basically have not been issued. So in this case, if it's false, meaning that they have not yet been issued. So I'm just looking at the 3 in my sequence. So I'm going to apply that filter, right? And I can actually sort this as well. You know, it's already automatically sorted based on the revision sequence. So that's good enough for me, but I could do it on the revision date if these were changed, or if the, you know, the revision, this is the name. If the name was something that I wanted to alphabetically sort on, I could do that very easily. So let's go back here to the properties. So we've got these properties. Now I'm going to say done, and I'm going to export. And here's where I would select the Excel file that I'm going to be sending the information to. And you'll notice I already have it here. So what I'm going to do is just overwrite. When I click on the revisions, create new, and say save, it's going to automatically tell me that, hey, you know what, you've created this before. Do you just want to overwrite it, or do you want to select another one? And so in this case, I'm just going to overwrite it, which is fine. Then I'm going to open up the file, and this is now opening up Excel. So here's what we have, pretty simple. It's almost like the dialogue that we saw in Revit, but we have a lot more flexibility. You'll notice in the dialogue, I could only add things one at a time, and I couldn't copy and paste, and I had to do each one basically line by line. So here's our revision description, right? We have 3, 4, 5. With Excel, there's this nice little trick where you can highlight 2 of them, 4 and 5, and then I can come down here and I can just pull that down, and I can automatically create 6, 7, 8, 9. On the revision date, I'm going to do a Control C, and I'm going to do the same thing. I do a Control V and just pick the same date, let's say. And also on that, I don't want them to be issued, so we'll say false. So I'll highlight that. And then issued by, right, or issued to. In reality, these haven't been issued yet, right? But let's say they're going to be issued by me. So I might want to fill that in, right? And I'm going to now take that and again do a Control C and highlight that. Oops, I could do the cell. Control C and Control V. And we'll do the same thing with the numbering sequence. Just make sure that they're all numbering. And in this case, any items with the work set, if I create new ones, it's going to be on the revisions work set. So basically, I've added, there's a couple things. I've added 4 lines, right? 4 sequences, but I've also edited some information from the original. So in fact, issued to, maybe I'll just say construction, just to show you that we have that as well. I can fill out. And then the key here is, notice over on column A, there is a Revit element ID. When it comes to Ideate BIMLink, this is what we're doing is we always have the Revit element ID, and that's the one-to-one relationship between what we're editing and modifying in Excel and the update in Revit. So the 4 lines that I've done here, revision, request for information 6 through 9, do not have any corresponding Revit element IDs, right? Because they're not there. They haven't existed yet. So what I need to do is tell Ideate BIMLink to create something new. So instead of the element ID, I'm going to type in the word new, and I'm going to make sure that it's also on the other 3 lines. So just to kind of recap there, what I did is I added 4 new sequences, and I changed some information about who they were issued by and who they were issued to. I'm going to save this. Now we're going to switch back over here to Revit and BIMLink. And it's as simple as saying import. And there's the revisions create new, and I'm going to open that up. And so it goes through and it says, okay, all of these items up above, it gives you a nice synopsis of all the elements it's changed. And so it said that everything in yellow has been an update. And it also gives you, like, if there are warnings, we do a lot of checking. Maybe the work set was checked out for this view, or someone else is working on it, and you weren't able to modify certain conditions. In this case, with revisions, you're owning that revisions work set, so it's probably not an issue. But we're doing things that it'll actually give you a warning where it'll say, like, you don't have that permission, or I can't do that, or that element is read only, or you're trying to modify an instance parameter where this is a type parameter. So I guess my point is we do a lot of error checking to make sure that there's just absolutely no possible way that you can goof up your data within Revit. So that's a really important characteristic of Ideate BIMLink, is it's doing all this error checking for you and making sure that what you're doing is allowed and correct. So now you see that it's actually got some messages here. We've got new revisions that have been created. So I'm going to say import and just close. Okay, now what do we do there? Well, we're going to go back to the view. Remember, the very first thing I showed you was the revisions. Now we're going to go up to revisions and look at, on this dialog, we've now got the 4 new sequences I created, right? And we've got that they were issued by Richard Taylor. That information has been filled out. They were issued to construction. So all of that data now has been filled out, and it was much easier to do that with Excel than it would have been to do this line by line in this dialog. And then another sort of interesting thing here is that like I said, you can continue to add or modify this information, or let's say I come back over just to show you that if I'm now going to come over to my annotate revision cloud, right? Now, if I look at my sequences, I have a whole series of sequences, and I can do number 8 here, and I can say, well, that's going to be 8. Let's do that cloud and say okay. And now when I fit this and look at the information over here, oops, wrong. Got to get up the title block. Now we've got 3 revision sequences that are on this sheet. And again, these are both, the date was today. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, that we want to be able to show not only the current revision, but we want to show the information for the sheet that has multiple revision sequences. So if you see here on the screen, I've got this Excel file that shows the sheet. In this case, let's say I'm just going to look at the sheet number C-00, the cover, and it's basically saying, which sequences along the top. In this case, the revision sequences, the revisions were called SD, DD, client review, permit, bid set, RF1, revision 7. And so revision 7 appears on the cover sheet. It's showing you that. And so it also appears on these other sheets. So it's giving you a matrix, basically, of which revisions appear on which sheet. So this Excel file is a template that we give any Ideate BIMLink current customer. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's a macro-enabled template that we created that I'm going to be able to write to, and it's available to any Ideate BIMLink customer. Okay, and so then it allows you to, like I said, do this sort of nice scenario where you've got images, you've got the sheet lists, and again, you've got the revisions along the top there. Okay, so let's go back to Ideate BIMLink and Revit. So what we do is we provide, again, these sample links. So I'm going to go over here to Ideate Software. We're going to go to Ideate BIMLink again. And remember, we had this revisions create new. I'm going to go load sample. And the 2 samples that we're going to be working with are under revision, and they are revisions on sheet and revisions. So I can hit Control, and basically I'm going to now create those 2, basically from the samples, right? I'm now going to create them in my project. So now I have revisions on sheet and revisions. When I do revisions on sheet, I want to go and look at the properties. And we've done some secret sauce here, I call it, where we've actually now built the revision sequences from left to right. So you'll notice, the two that were issued were the sequence in-house number 1 and 2, but then we've built 3, 4, 5, and we've got this sort of matrix style schedule already sort of predefined. I want to go down to A11, and I don't see that in my list here, right? So what I can do is look this little tick mark that says show full preview. That will actually show all of the elements. In this case, I've got it says here full preview 96 elements. So now I can come down to A11. There's the furniture plan. So this is showing, right? You saw that when I did the very first demonstration, I did sequence number 4 and 5, or I added 5, and I added that addendum. And then just right a couple minutes ago, I added sequence 8. And so those are showing. Now, what's also interesting is we've added some features within Ideate BIMLink to allow you to sort of interact with the dialogue without having to export to Excel. So we call this live editing. So as an example, I don't have an addendum, right? Meaning I don't have a bubble, a revision bubble. But what I can do is check this sequence 7, right? And I can say, okay. And what that will do is actually apply sequence 7 here. And if I close this, you'll now come over and immediately that has RFI 7 has been applied here, right? And so you see then 7 and 8, and it's giving me the based on the sequence, or I should say the sequence name. So I've been able to add that just by clicking that within the dialog. So that's kind of a nice feature if I wanted to add the revision. In this case, again, it doesn't have a cloud because I have to draw the cloud, but I could still add it as one of the revision sequences. So let's go back to BIMLink here again. So like I said, I've got these two, revisions on sheet and revisions. Now let's go back to revisions on sheet. And these are my properties. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, as you saw me do earlier. So I've got the sheet number, the sheet name, and then by default, like I said, it's created the revision sequences, right? So you'll notice over here to the left I have a lot more available fields, and I have, again, the current issued to. I have things like, referencing detail, scale, all this information when it comes from basically properties from sheets. But I want to add the, let's say, issued by, okay? And I don't want that the last. I want to move that up in my sequence here. So I want to have basically the sheet number, the sheet name, and the current issued by. So I'm going to say, okay. So that's my sequence again from, if you look over here down below, I've got the Revit element ID that's always part of it, the sheet number, sheet name, now current revision issued by, and then the sequences. So here we go, export. And this is a macro enabled template, like I said, that is available for your use. It's called the Ideate DIR, Document Issue and Revisions template. And you'll see we've actually made several versions of it. Now the current one is version 7. So I'm going to go save. And it already, I've done this process before, so it knows that there's a worksheet there. I'm just going to overwrite that particular worksheet and to say fine. Now, normally, when you're doing this process, you would open the file right away. But in fact, this has a couple of different tabs or worksheets. So what I want to do is basically say done. I now want to go to revisions, and I want to export that to the exact same file. So now when I select on that DIR template, it's now going to create a worksheet or a tab called revisions. And so I'm going to do that. Now that I've done both of those, both the revisions on sheet and the revisions, I can open up the file. And so you'll see this is what it looks like in Excel, right? And so just to let you know, but here is the revisions. This is the tab down below This was exported from BIMLink, what I just did, this tab, revisions. Then there's revisions on sheet, right? And so here were all the sheets, the sheet name, and then it was issued by, and then the sequences, all 1, 2, 3, 4. There's actually instructions on how to use this and how to customize it, because now the summary tab is this tab called DIR. And this little macro basically says, okay, well, I'm going to take information in the revisions tab and the revisions on sheet tab, and I'm going to put them together into this this sort of overview. And so here, I actually had, you could put your firm. I have amazing architecture. I made a little image here. But basically now, if we come down to our sheet that we've been working with, which is A11, right? So let's come down to, where is, I know it's here somewhere. Furniture plan. I just saw it. Right there, duh. Right before my eyes. So there's the A11-1 on line or cell number 16. And you notice that it basically is saying that here was the first one, the revision, right? If we look up, it's basically got, this was the one that was RFI number 4. This was the second one, which was RFI 5. Then we skipped to RFI 7 and RFI 8. So that's 3 and 4. So what it's doing, if I switch back to Revit there, and close this for a second, you'll notice that the sheet that we have, right, here are the sequences, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got 4, 5, 7, 8. And then here we have, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're corresponding to 4, 5, 7, and 8. And again, we have this where it has the date, vertically. And again, I added this issued by. That was something, again, you can customize it in the sense of you can add any particular columns or fields that you want. So if you want the sheet number and sheet name and you want to add other things to it, well, you can do that very easily. And that's what I just showed you that example, is I just put this issued by here as well. So it's extracting the information. So this has a little macro, basically, like I said, that takes the information, what I call the raw export on revisions tab, and the raw export on revisions on sheet tab, and then it puts them together into this DIR tab. And so this is one specific workflow, but there's a lot of things, or a lot of workflows that Ideate BIMLink supports that are very similar to this, where you can send out multiple tabs of data, and then you can use Excel to manipulate, append, maybe combine different pieces of information together and get it the way get it the look and feel the way you want. Okay, now here's the second part of the problem, so to speak, is now we have this great overview, right? I have this amazing architecture. I have this information here. How do I display it back into Revit? Because as I mentioned, Revit doesn't support this in the schedule. How do I create this in a schedule view? Well, that's where our Ideate Sticky comes into play. So the first part of the equation, if you will, was Ideate BIMLink, and that was exporting the information, manipulating the information the way you want in Excel. Ideate Sticky allows you to link Excel data into your Revit project, but as a Revit schedule. So let's go back over here to Revit. We're going to go over here and fit. And before I do this, I'm going to switch back to my presentation here just to kind of give you that overview of like what is Sticky. Well, Ideate Sticky allows you to elegantly link Excel data into your Revit project as a schedule, just like what I was saying. So it could be, manufacturing data. It could be, a matrix style schedule that we're going to be doing here. It could be general notes, anything that's in Excel, basically. And the great thing about that is that once changes are made to the Excel model, they can be updated within Revit. And in fact, you can set this to be auto update so that when you load into the project, it will automatically update all of the stickies or the sticky schedules that you have within your project. So as an example, if you have general notes, you change maybe a couple conditions of the general notes in the Excel file, that would then be populated or propagated out to all of the projects. So you may have 20 or 30 projects that's using those general notes, and then it's all updated. So let's take a look at that. So here we are, we're in our lovely sheet that I've been working with, that A11 furniture plan. I'm going to come over here to my view. I'm going to create a new sheet. And by the way, I can actually do this in Ideate BIMLink too, create a whole number of sheets if I have a whole series of sheets that I've already laid out in Excel. Another great workflow of Ideate BIMLink is creating those sheets or creating the sheets with all the information. But in this case, I'm just doing the one sheet, so that's fine. Now I'm going to come over here to Ideate Software, and I'm going to select on Sticky. All right, and so here I've already got one sticky in my project. I'm going to create, and what I'm going to do is navigate, and you see here I've got this is where I'm at my training presentations, and this was what I did, that DIR template. So that template that we give you, which is version 7, I want to link in to my project. And it knows, it says, okay, well, hey, Richard, there are actually, there was the raw tab, which was revisions. There's revisions on sheet. And look, I'll just show you that first. Let's do this revisions. I just want to bring in the revisions, okay? And I'm going to call this, revision list or something. And once I do that, you'll see that I can now bring that up. And here is that tab showing me all of the revision sequences with the description, the revision date, and so forth. So, I may or may not want all of this, but at least maybe I want it there for reference. So now I'm going to come back over here to Sticky, and the real scenario that I want to do is create it. I'm going to pick the same Excel file, which was that template version 7, and I'm going to do the DIR, which is the summary. Right, that was the one that we're really concerned with. We have, again, we don't want instructions. We want the summary tab. So I might want to say, revision on sheet summary. So now I'm going to select OK and say close. And here we have, let's see how large that is. Oh, it looks like I can get that over here to my left, and I'll align it up with the other schedule. So there you see when I'm pulling that information, I've got the sheet number. And if you come down here to what we were looking at was our A11 furniture plan, right? We have, again, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which were these sequences that it's showing here, which was RFI 4, 5, 7, and 8, and has all those dates. And again, if you come back over to what I'm showing here, I'll just show you a couple other things, like in the sense of, it's amazing architecture, right? But let's say the address is, I'm trying to think, I can't remember the Microsol office. I know it's not State Street. You're gonna have to, I'll just say Milk Street. I know it's close. And what is it, Dan?
Oliver Street.
Oliver, that's it. I knew it was close. Okay, so I'll just say Oliver Street. That wouldn't have come to me, by the way, so thank you for that. And in fact, let's see. Oh, there, San Francisco. I'll just say, hey, you. Let's say, whoops. That's why, because it's 2 Oliver Street, and I'll say Boston, Mass. Okay, so now I've changed some things, and in fact, I can actually take, let's say, these items here and maybe make them a different color, light, right? So it's amazing architecture on Oliver Street in Boston, Mass. I am going to save this. So over here in Revit, notice that it did not immediately change. The same way it works, the same way as if it's a CAD file or even a Revit file that you've linked in. You don't want things just constantly changing as you're working. However, if I come over here to the sticky dialog, it immediately knows it's out of date because I made a change to that. So what I can do is I can highlight, let's say, come down here, I'm going to highlight on these, and I'm going to say update. So when I do that, it's going to go out and get the latest and greatest. And there you see that it's got that the brown that I did with amazing architecture on Oliver Street in Boston, Mass. So you can update it. If you select on this auto update, what it does is it basically keeps that ticked, and then the next time you open up the project, at the time that you're opening the project, it makes sure that all of the stickies, so in this case, the revision list and the revision on sheet summary would be updated to what to the latest and greatest. So let's go ahead. Oops, I don't need to update that, but that's fine. So let's go ahead and fit that. So again, and that is a schedule. So if you come over here, you'll notice that I have my revision on sheet summary that's in my schedule list. And in fact, if I double click on the project browser, it goes into the editing view. I can come over here and actually say amazing architecture for Boston. And I can make that change, but it's telling me that it's being automatically updated. That's what I've set it to be updated from sticky. So that what that means is that if I make a change in Excel, it's going to overwrite what I've just done here. So you want to be cognizant of that. Now you certainly can, in some cases, you need to get something out the door, you just want to be able to make the change, or you want to disassociate it with the Excel file. You can do that as well. But this is just a warning basically telling you that you've linked this schedule to the Excel data and that you really should be making the changes in Excel, and then that would propagate and update all of the stickies that would have that information. So let's go back there. So then now we've got the E104, and then again back to our furniture plan. So that's why we're using the two solutions, Ideate BIMLink to export the information and manipulate the revision schedule and sequences, and then Ideate Sticky to be able to link that back into the Revit project.